Here we go. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Light on the Horizon. This must be, I think we've done a year of Light on the Horizon calls. They're the last Friday of every month. Chantal and myself and a couple other folks started these last summer, I think, and we just wanted to provide kind of a resource and support for people who were looking at the climate crisis, and now it's become also added in with coronavirus and possibly what I see as the election crisis in the United States, and possibly you have your own crisis happening in your own country. So whatever sort of external crisis you're facing, that's what we're here to talk about. And I'm going to introduce our main speaker today, Aaron Turner. And first, I'm just going to go ahead and read his bio. I had it up here a second ago. Here we go. Aaron Turner received a first-class degree in anthropology at Swansea University and a master's at Brunel in medical anthropology. He worked at Brunel as a faculty member and a researcher at the Center for Health, Sickness, and Disablement, and got his PhD there. He was interested in how a deeper understanding of humanity could enable positive change, or at least more mental freedom that might allow new ways of thinking or behaving and break old patterns. His search drew Aaron to study the three principles in the US with Pransky and Associates. In every area it was applied, the understanding brought significant improvement, as many of us know. Based on this experience, Aaron has dedicated his professional life to highlighting and applying the transformative potential of a principles-based understanding of the mind to our current global challenges and limitations, highlighting the direct link between people's state of mind and their outcomes. Aaron founded One Thought to bring an appreciation of this understanding to the mainstream, and he's at www.onethought.com. And just a quick personal introduction. Aaron and I have been in touch over many years, having both been around sort of as very young people with Sydney Banks and living through Sid's, the end of his life, the end of my father's life. A lot, really. And just recently we've reconnected. And what I was interested in having Aaron share with us today, and hopefully this recording will be shared with many others, about what he's been seeing around shifting his own work or his own, there's been something happening with Aaron. And I'd rather have him talk about it than me, because it's his experience and his insights. And so I'm just happy to have him talk about, Aaron, what you've been seeing in the last couple of months, because for the first time, at least since I've known you or in talking with you, you've become more interested in maybe engaging a little with the world's problems and issues. Mm-hmm. And I know that's tricky territory for people in three principles and all spiritual people. What is the boundary between sort of maintaining personal grounding and going within, mm-hmm. and then and manifesting that in the outside world that can sometimes feel politics and activism can feel sometimes very harsh, very confrontational. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to be here to talk with you, and the field is open for everyone, and yes. It'll be a dialogue. And so I've had some thoughts recently I'd love to just bounce off of you and the group. So, but please share your recent journey, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'll do that. I guess more as a start to the conversation than anything else, and then we can see where we go from there. But before we do, I think everybody's with me in wanting to wish Shannon a happy birthday. And so you feel free to unmute if you want. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shannon.
Happy birthday to you.
guys are incredible. Thank you so much. That's amazing. Thank you guys.
And now I know why the choirs say we can't actually all sing together on Zoom.
I know. How hard was that? I know. So I thought, I was listening to your introduction, Amy, and I thought a good place to start would be, you know, in terms of the principles, I got interested in it because I could see that there was something I didn't understand about human beings. So I kind of, I first got interested when I was kind of sitting in with George and Linda, and I saw 2 or 3 things I just didn't understand. I didn't understand why they didn't talk to people about the problems they came in for. So if a couple came in for help with infidelity, I never heard them talk about the infidelity or what to do about it or how to think about it or how to resolve it. And I wondered, like, how do you get paid here? Like, people people come in, they want help with something, and you don't even touch it, you know. You just, yeah, well, I just talk about what I want to talk about. That's what it felt like, you know. And I couldn't see any link between what they were talking about and what the people came in with. So that was confusing to me. But even more confusing was people changed drastically almost overnight at some point. So they talk generally, I didn't even know what they were talking about. I mean, it was so out of my world. Like, my world was, you have a problem, you think about that problem, you try to solve it. And if you don't solve it, you think about it some more or you move on, right? That was my world. And they didn't live in that world at all. But people would just shift and they would change, and they would almost always shift into this state of unencumbered well-being and like fresh-minded bliss and freshness and enthusiasm and richness and openness and presence and contentment. It was wonderful to see. A kind of feeling you don't see in people over 7 very often. You know? And that shocked me. Like, how did that happen? How did that happen? And thirdly, what really got my attention was, from that other state, they didn't have the same problems, right? A good majority of the things they complained about in their distress state didn't even exist anymore. And as you probably know, it's like, when you're more distressed, you're more sensitive, you're more reactionary, things blow out of proportion in your perception, and lots of things look like problems that aren't. Like, why is the world against me today? Like, you know, like, I can remember many years ago my kids watching me, you know, brutalize the printer, you know, because it was just, you know, this is not the day for it to be messing with you. You mess with the wrong person today, printer. And that was, you know, that seemed perfectly like the right course of action to me at the time. And so there's lots of phantoms of an unclear mind. And over the years in my life and in clients' lives and in friends' lives, you can see that these phantoms that cause emotional distress also cause shifts in perception and emotion and impulse, and to me, that's the root of dysfunction. It's like a distorted mind creates the software for a dysfunctional X, whatever it may be. And when people's minds are clearer, the problems that they had left over, that were things that just didn't go away, that weren't figments of their, you know, distressed perceptions, like bankruptcies or maybe infidelities or loss of a loved one or a terminal illness or whatever it might be, looked totally different to them. It didn't jar them, overwhelm them, trouble them the same way. And in the place of all that suffering, they tended to have a view of it and a feeling about it and thinking about it that made it seem less of a profound obstacle and more of something they could understand, relate to, accommodate. It wasn't no longer something they felt they needed to go for help with, no matter what it was. And that intrigued me. And it's intrigued me to this day. So when I was listening to you, Amy, I was thinking, what drew me into working in the principles was that link between people's state of mind. I call it state of mind. You can call it levels of consciousness. You can call it levels of clarity. You can call it whatever you want. But the link between people's level of clarity or their state of mind and the reality they live in and the influence they have on that reality is really, really interesting. So we work, I mean, just to illustrate this, we work with a company, and one of the reasons why I wanted to work with organizations is because I thought at that time, 10 years ago when we founded One Thought, I thought, this is how you change the world. The consciousness has to change. The level of perception and feeling and thought by which people operate has to change. You can't have the same governing thought level that produces all these limitations and dysfunctions and tensions and competition and politics and everything, and expect a different outcome, right? So the amount of organization, so I'll tell you about this organization. So when we worked with them, they had a leader who was highly respected because he was very capable, but wasn't highly trusted. And the company was split into two. The original founders who wanted a family type feeling and all the employees that believed in a family type feeling, and the new general manager who believed in efficient professionalism, and the new hires who all believed in that. And these people thought that the new people were running roughshod over the most meaningful thing in the company, which was the feeling of welcoming and ease and humanity and trust and well-being. And these people thought that the old people were kind of lazy, indulgent people who didn't know how to act professionally and were holding the company back. And they were pulling in opposite directions, and they couldn't get together. And they tried lots of things to sort this out, but they'd never looked at the purity of mind. They'd never looked at what is the purity of mind with which everybody's coming to work. They'd never looked at that. But they would have said, oh, we've tried everything. We've tried mediation, we've tried workshops, we've tried, switching people's roles around. I mean, God knows what they tried. And what we did, our job was to teach them the principles. And basically what we taught them is, we travel through different realities that represent different levels of purity of mind. And what is mind? Mind is a pure intelligence in which there's a richness of potential and a depth of impersonal intelligence. And you can really trust that, like you're plugged in, And as you start to feel bad, it's because you're having this, there is the inclusion of some kind of distorting thought that not only disrupts your feeling of well-being, but it also disrupts your ability to see in a clearer, more intelligent, neutral, undistorted way, right? Now, when they saw that, it was very touching, because they saw they'd lost touch with something within themselves. They'd lost touch with something that had been meaningful within themselves, and they'd lost touch with it. Like, sometimes when people learn about this and they feel it, they're like, oh my God, I used to feel this way when I was a kid. Like, I realized that one of the first things I saw when I started to understand the principles was I thought I was living in a clear mind, but I was actually in chronic mild anxiety. And I flashed back to my 7-year-old self, seeing my mum run around in chronic anxiety and wondering how that ever made sense. And then there I was at 25, totally subscribed. And it kind of broke the spell, really. And then I got my perspective back. I got my outside perspective back. So that happened to them. And when that happened to them, several things happened instantaneously and never went back. And we worked with them for the next 6-7 years and kind of know them to this day. The first thing that changed that never went back is that when we started working with them, everybody there was so stressed that they wouldn't help anybody else. So, when you're really stressed and somebody says, excuse me, like, I don't have time for that. So they were all like that. So they're like, nobody helps me, because they go to each other for help and they're like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Their thinking was so ramped up that like one more thought was always the straw that broke the camel's back, and they just were not. So what happened, and the other thing was they were trying to grow. And when they understood what a purer mind, a clearer mind felt like, and their role as the person who's deciding what thoughts they want to live and work by in any moment, right? Their stress went away. And when their stress went away, they were able to think more widely, and they started to grow. They've been trying to grow for 7 years. They started to grow. And all of them had a much increased workload and a massively diminished level of stress, which won't be a surprise to you. But the other thing that happened was the conflict disappeared, utterly disappeared. We didn't talk it out. We didn't address it, just disappeared. They started to see that their resentful, judgmental view of each other was not really a credible state of mind. And when they kind of let their trust for that go a bit, and their mind started to open up, and the way I'm seeing this at the moment is that their consciousness became less restricted. Like their true, pure consciousness started to open up. And those deeper feelings of their own consciousness of respect and care and goodwill came out, and they started to see, wow, yeah, we do want to be really, and they founded their values, and the values were, we want to have a high level of professional excellence with a really warm feeling. Because you can go to places that are very warm but a little bit sloppy, and places that are really efficient but very cold. We want to bring it all through having a clearer mind. And the reason that example is, that's what I thought I was doing. So I thought the problems of the world are a function of how distorted the average state of mind is, how low the average level of consciousness is. And if you are working on raising the consciousness, you're working on that. Like you're in the engine room working on that. And that's, we were just working away on that. And then in the last few months, as Amy said, and I thought, just like the people I've described in the company, we're doing everything we can on that. That's what I thought. And then as the pandemic came in, several things happened around a similar time. One was that Leela and I decided that, why are we just helping businesses? Why don't we, and we always have an impact. When people's minds change, their impact improves. Why don't we help people that are trying to make a difference in the things that we think matter, like the environment? So we started thinking like that. And then, so then Amy asked if people wanted to help with Extinction Rebellion. I was like, oh, perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. So that put climate issues a little bit more on my mind, which was interesting, because as Amy said, because I saw myself in the consciousness business, I kind of ignored everything else. You know, kind of, oh, I'm in the consciousness business. Everything else is down the line. I just concentrate on this, and then it'll show up down there. You know, and concentrating on the mainstream, I thought, well, yeah, this will make a big difference. But I started to wonder. I started to wonder, well, when is that going to happen? Like, how long is this? How long is this going to take? Just how much do people's consciousness have to change? So I was kind of slightly wondering about that. And then when the lockdown came, I don't know about you, but all of the activity of our normal lives kind of got stripped away. And well, at least my experience is, there was a huge volume of seemingly benign thinking that I realized had been weighing on me all day, every day. Which is like, what time is it? Where am I going? What shall I wear? What time do I be there? Where shall I have lunch? Where shall I have breakfast? You know? Like, you think, oh, no big deal. But actually, when it was gone, my mind just opened up. Like, I don't know if you noticed in London during the lockdown, it's like the nature in the city just breathed. Birds came out and everything, when there was quiet, and it was just, there was kind of like a really natural feeling of a blossoming rather than busyness. And that was my experience myself, that I just got in a much freer minded, more sensitive, reflective place, like naturally, which was really nice. I really liked it. It was lovely. And at the same time was thinking more about the climate issues, and kind of reading some of the things that Amy had been sending. And at the same similar time, the Black Lives Matter issue had kind of really come front to the center. And I started wondering, like, and it was all really disturbing and upsetting, because they're things that really matter, the custody of the environment and the future of the planet, and you know, brutality and violence and discrimination and injustice built into society, and the horrific experience that some people have, and the complete oblivion that everybody else has. It's just not right. And it was interesting to me, because my first reaction to it was real distress, like real distress. And I noticed that compared to what I'd experienced in the past around climate, like, I know racism exists. I know injustice exists. I know the climate is in serious trouble. I know it. But compared to the way it felt in lockdown, when I was really open, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. Same as when you see someone homeless. Every 100th time I feel it. The rest of the time, I say to myself, oh, that's messed up. And maybe I give them some money or try to do something, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And when it was getting upset, I could see that one of my inclinations was to kind of like hazmat it, you know, just like seal it in gel, like get that sealed up. It's leaking sensitivity, because it made me feel incredibly vulnerable, which is interesting. We'll come back to that. And somewhat uncomfortable and heartbroken in some ways. Like, the climate change thing is heartbreaking and terrifying. And the Black Lives Matter is just plain heartbreaking and just unbearably, I don't know, I don't know how to say it, but it's just really, it's really raw. It's raw and extreme. And so it was interesting to see, wow, I started to appreciate it. And then I was also thinking, sorry if I'm going all over the place, I'll wrap it up at some point. But I was starting to wonder, well, what's the consciousness piece of this? What's the levels of consciousness, levels of clarity piece of this? And it was obvious that it's not protect yourself from the feeling. that was obvious. Yeah, I've been around this long enough to know that being frightened of a feeling is not the right direction. So that was obvious, and it was humbling and intriguing to see, wow. See, I thought I wasn't afraid of feelings because I know they're thought, and I know thought is not substantial and mind is the only reality. Oh yeah, I know that, I'm cool. But I didn't live in that knowledge as regards these issues. And actually, when the true open-minded feeling of them actually got in, I did have a knee-jerk, no, you got to shut that down. I didn't want to, but it was interesting to see, oh, you have that. And that intrigued me. I was like, wow, there are pockets of my consciousness that are shut down. And what was interesting is they're shut down about things that I care about. Things that really matter on a heartfelt level, I'm shut down about. And if you think about it, which I haven't until just this second, how can you do anything about that you don't relate to on a heartfelt level? How could you do that? You couldn't do that. Right? It would all be superficial. And I've seen that in companies where they say, oh yes, we want to do something about this. Let's make a new rule. And nothing changes. And they say, well, how do we get people to adhere to this new rule? It's like, well, it has no place in their feeling. It has no place in their mind. It has no place. So it only exists on this rule book. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Right? So in my kind of interest in discovering what do I feel, what do I think, what happened, like a deeper, purer mind, a deeper, purer consciousness is the solution to the previous level of distortion. That's my premise. And so I was like, okay, Aaron, so time to open up and go deeper. So okay. But it was interesting because it's like you're navigating all these different paths and they're all credible. All the paths are credible. Like hatred is credible, upset is credible, guilt is credible, hopelessness is credible, terror is credible, and it's all credible. But I wanted to see, well, what would happen if I put aside my fear of what I might feel if I was really open, because that was the only thing that was stopping me. It was an insecurity about a feeling. And when I work with people, it's always like that people, they don't want to have, like, I don't like anxiety. I don't want anxiety. So they protect themselves from anxiety so they can't go through it. So it's always a bigger deal. It's always like a stumbling block. So it was really interesting, kind of like, it's almost like letting go of a slide, letting go of letting go of the discomfort with the feeling so it can really take a hold. And it was interesting because it was just such a practical lesson of what I normally am teaching people, but hadn't seen in this way myself, was that you feel really vulnerable, but actually there's nothing to be scared of except the discomfort, because you open up and you become more tender and you do feel out of control, because you are out of control. You're not controlling what you're thinking and feeling. You're open to something else and whatever effect that has on you. And so what I was interested in is, what's the right direction of consciousness? And for whatever reason, I decided, okay, well, I don't think it's in the distress, even though that is credible and it makes sense and it seems respectful of the issues. And I don't want to, I do respect the issues, but what happens if I let my mind go in a more neutral direction? And in a more neutral direction, it was surprising to me. One part wasn't surprising, which was, it was deeper and richer and less personal and more guided, like it pointed in a direction. And but what was interesting was, it was much more there was much more, there was a lot of suffering, not suffering like bad suffering, but just open-heartedness to the, you know, just the feelings of suffering and grief and loss and all of those things, to kind of have them exist and go through them and not try to filter it or be, you know, prejudiced against it. And so what I feel I learned from that is I really could see that in a deeper way than maybe before, that you can feel the blind spots in your own consciousness, and you can be willing to, you know, unhook them and let your mind open up. And when I look around, I think that's what's missing. I think that's what's missing from all of these issues, is that the ability to have a deeper consciousness. It looks to me like when you have a deeper consciousness, the thoughts that created the issue are no longer generating what happens. So it seems very realistic that you can have jumps in the way the world looks by deeper shifts in consciousness, not generally, but around these issues. So I've had jumps in consciousness, but I've been completely intellectualizing the issue of race and conning myself into the idea that, yes, I know about racism and it is bad, but secretly I'd intellectualized it and basically written it off as a hopeless issue, but essentially just frozen it in so it couldn't, I had no consciousness around it. And I hadn't realized that because my intellect had put in a statement that said, yes, you know it's wrong, you know it shouldn't be, you want to do what you can, but oh my God, it's a big deal, it's a big issue, I don't know when it's going to change. So you don't, and it was interesting to see how my mind had created decoys that stopped me being affected by issues, that stopped me having shifts in consciousness, that stopped me evolving, and that stopped my evolution having an impact on those issues. And then I started to see, wow, that's missing for everybody on these issues, right? If you look at mostly the white population on the issue of race, there's a frozen consciousness. There's, every time you bring it up, there's not listening, openness. I want to, it's like, no, this is a position that works for me, I'm not moving. Right? Either, oh, they're complaining, or no, I'm not racist, whatever. But the feeling around it is, boom, next. That's the feeling around it, and the feeling of a deeper consciousness is totally different. It's totally different. It's that willingness not to be in control and let wherever what we call wisdom take you where it takes you, in feeling and in insight and in direction. And same with the climate issue. It's like people are frightened. I think probably same is true of race. People are frightened of looking at it for fear of what they might feel that might leave them stumped in the face of their feelings. I think that's why Sydney Banks said if people weren't scared of their feelings, it'd be a different world, it'd be a totally different world. And to me, I'm seeing, well, this is where it's getting stuck. And because of that, and because we know about the principles, and because of having had this experience and seeing other people have these experiences, it's starting to look, well, maybe that part is more, that part is solvable, and like what a difference that could make. So Leela and I, the last couple of weeks, have been thinking about, all right, so that's the part that needs to become visible. So if you're tackling socioeconomic problems, everybody knows you need to tackle laws, and you need to tackle, you know, culture, and you need to tackle finance, and you need to tackle the economy. But do they know you can't change it without an expanded consciousness, without unfreezing the consciousness, without deepening the consciousness, without freeing the consciousness? You can't, it won't. And if you do, it has to. So like I've been experimenting, and then this is the last thing I'm going to say, because I know this is supposed to be a discussion. Anyway, what about me? So I've been working with a group on a project of theirs, and we've gotten to this point where it just didn't feel right. It's like I was really uncomfortable with where they were at. They were really uncomfortable. They were pushing in a direction that I wasn't comfortable with. It just seemed all messed up, and like in that state, I was like, I just want to walk away. I don't want to be involved. I just want to walk away. And because I'm kind of, the direction that I'm looking is, well, what if there isn't the distortion of consciousness, then there's not going to be the problem. So it was like, okay, Aaron, so you're going to have to get comfortable with all this discomfort and find your ability to sit in a freer, lighter, purer consciousness around this. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's not happening. You know, when you get impatient about your state of mind, like, no, it hasn't happened now. Okay, well, try again. Try again. Why don't you try again? Okay. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I kind of forgot about it for a couple of days. And then I started to come out of all the uncomfortable, reactive, whatever they were, thoughts. And that reality started to dissolve. And I just started to feel much more at ease and freer. And I saw how I felt in a way I hadn't before. I was kind of a bit uncomfortable with how I felt. I saw how I felt. And we had this conversation set up with the group that was supposed to be a let's sort this out conversation. And you know, when you think about those conversations, you think you're going to have to really express yourself and talk it out and work it through. But I thought, well, why don't I just see what comes out of a purer consciousness and kind of put the rest aside? So we had this really nice conversation where they really talked about how they saw it and what they wanted to do and how it was going to work and all of that. And I really got a feel for it. And as they're talking, kind of certain things occurred to me. And so there didn't really seem to be anything to say. But in the last kind of few minutes, I was like, well, look, here's what it looks like to me, and just being very open and clear and how I felt about it. In the last few minutes, everything shifted. It felt like a partnership. We felt like family. There was a basis to look out for each other. It was utterly different, and we hadn't sorted it out. We hadn't talked about it. It's like that magic of, like, when you're in a state where the disruptive thought is not running the show, you're in a world that's not created by that thought. And it's magical because realities shift like that. They just shift like that. And to me, that's really important to remember, but not to get, I think sometimes, well, I speak for myself, sometimes I get lazy about that. Like, yeah, consciousness will change everything, you know. But not to be really diligent at the coalface, which is where seeing our own freedom of consciousness and not being frightened of our feelings and setting ourselves free to enable our part in whatever that is. Because I really don't think you can change without a shifting consciousness. But I also now see it has to be, not has to be, but I think it's really leveraged and important that it be a shifting consciousness relative to what it is that you want to change. I hadn't really seen that before lockdown. I thought all boats rise with the tide, which is true to some degree, but in our little created personal thought worlds, we're stubborn about certain things that we're uncomfortable with or feel bad about, or we harbor things. And the last thing I wanted to say is, seeing how it worked in me was not only freeing for me, but I can see how it's working for other people too. So you get more of a vision for how it might change in the population, which has been intriguing and hopeful.
So super cool. That's what I want to say. Just really I've told you, Erin, you were one of the first practitioners who reached out to me to say, I want to help. And that
Mm.
really meant a lot because it felt, well, Chantal actually and Kimberly were on board with climate some time ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
Shannon and others. Uh, but it felt for a while like, where is everybody? Like,
Yeah.
because I did see, well, we were working with corporate for an end, right? Like to
Mm-hmm.
expand profits, for example, is that there's a
Mm-hmm.
goal there. And why couldn't the goal be,
Right.
saving the planet, for example?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so I
Totally.
just have a couple thoughts, and then I'd love to hear which you could speak to, or someone else could chime in
Yeah.
and add to that. But the first one of the thoughts I've had, and I haven't really had the time, but I feel like it'd be such an important conversation, is how I see a lot of people at the sort of top of our society really feeling like their money and their status is where their well-being is,
Mm.
and having a hard time letting go.
Mm.
There's something that you're saying about letting go of, like, I can't feel those feelings, I can't, this letting go issue sort of keeps occurring to me, that we can
Yeah.
let go and expand, and this.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so there's that. And then,
No, that's a really good one, Amy.
yeah, I mean, maybe even having webinars where it's more directed just toward corporate people about that, perhaps.
Yeah.
um
And it's funny. Sorry, I'll wait till you finish. Sorry.
no, go ahead, because that's the other piece is completely different.
Okay. Well, one is I think it's for that reason that it's really useful to have relationships with all sorts of people. But it's also really easy. We all do it. Like we lose our appreciation that we're all the same. So like many years ago, I was at a dinner of a rabbi who's the rabbi on Capitol Hill. So he's the rabbi on Capitol Hill. And the rabbi that invited us there told him about the work that we do, and and it was kind of and so the Capitol Hill rabbi says, why don't you come and help what would you help some of these politicians? And I basically said, I don't think so, and he says, why not? I said, well, I'm really into wasting my time. I don't think these people are interested in things like well-being and something deeper. I think they've got a whole other agenda, so I don't imagine they'd be very interested in what we do. And he said, which really stopped me in my tracks, he says, you have no idea. You have no idea. He says, these people, they come to me, they need this. They're thirsty for it. They need it. This is what matters to them. This is what they lack. This is what they're struggling with. And I thought, God, of course, you can't lose touch with yourself and not feel the loss of it. You can't do that. And just to add to that, I don't know if anybody's seen it on Netflix. There's this program called The Family, and it's about a secret Christian organization that's involved at the very highest levels of American politics. But the thing about it that stood out to me is when you look at the politicians who got involved in The Family, there is a huge feeling for richness and commitment to that organization. And the reason is it pushed them deeper within themselves. And that became the most meaningful thing within their lives. And these people, when they meet, they just talk about Jesus and living yourself more accountable to Jesus. And the people that they were involved with got something that they didn't get from the rest of their lives. And then you start to see, God, that's what we got. That's what we're doing. But it's easy to lose sight of that, just how that is the most meaningful thing. And you're right. I think that's where it does belong. So, we've always been thinking, well, how do you head in that direction? How do you be of service there? Because it will make a big difference.
The other piece, I think you touched on it, is the context that we're living in the United States. Whether I mean, from my perspective anyway, is and you may not agree with me, but from my perspective, is that we're looking at the rise of fascism in the United States.
No, I can see that.
Mhm.
I can see that.
And so that to me is very meaningful because, you know, people learn from each other. The dictator in the Philippines and Putin and Kim Jong-un and so on, they're all watching each other for, you know, tactics.
Mm,
How do we gain complete power? And I believe Trump
mm,
is part of that circle of people who think this way. And so that's very relevant to me as a U.S. citizen, and I've had to come to terms with, and we may lose this democracy. It's possible.
mm, mm-hmm,
There's something about coming to terms with what may happen that seems helpful,
mm,
and it's not fun either. And
mm,
uh, and
mm,
and sometimes I get into three principles groups or discussions, and there's a way that people talk about these things, and this may be what you're speaking to, as if it were, oh, well, people are just in their separate realities, or they're just, you know, it's all just a game of the mind. And, you know, and I understand that on one level, and on the other level, I'm like, well, okay, I mean, what would it be like in Germany, you know, when you have Hitler rising, and we don't know what this is. It might not be exactly like that, but there's
yeah,
something similar going on. And
yes,
um, is that what we would be saying? You know, oh, well, you know, little this,
yeah,
little that, 6 of one, half dozen, you know, it's all just,
yeah,
and that, you know, I was talking to Julianne yesterday, and we both were, you know, she'd been watching the Republican National Convention. Honestly, there's a lot of anxiety here about what
mm,
will happen. Will this, even if
mm,
Trump doesn't win, will he try to stay? Will there be
mm-hmm,
chaos
mm-hmm,
in the
right, right,
streets? And
yeah, right,
we're looking at things we really haven't seen in the States in a
yes,
long time.
yes,
Um, and it just strikes me that I don't think Sid was always like, you
no,
know, Aaron, he was
yeah,
not
yeah,
not always jolly and cheerful and
yes,
speaking in kind tones.
yes,
And so sometimes I feel like there's a bit of tone policing going on. Like if you're somehow
there is,
angry,
yeah,
if you're somehow upset or anxious,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
not okay. You're not okay because you're not a spiritual person. And part of me is just sometimes I just put things out there just to kind of blow that out of the water. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of,
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
even really feel the feelings, but I'll just share just because I'm like, to be honest, excuse the French, I'm like, fuck it. You know, like it's okay to be mad. Like I'm mad
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Anyway, anyway, if you want to comment on that or if anyone else does have a follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I relate to everything that you're saying. I the in my experience, the relevance of the principles goes in and out. Um, so like when I have experiences as the relevance of the principles diminishes, I'm just in it wherever I'm in, and that's my way of looking at the situation. And I'm kind of like, maybe I'm anxious or appalled or frightened or judgmental or whatever. But the power, to me, the power of the principles, when that memory comes back in, it allows me to get strategic.
Mm.
And what I mean by strategic is like, okay, am I going to bet on my personal reactivity, or am I going to bet on divine on divine universal power? And rightly or wrongly, and I'm experimenting this life the same way everybody else is, but in principle, I'm generally on the strategy. I think we are possessed of an incredible power of mind and spirit that's directly connected to everything else that's going on, and that you can really harness and produce power and impact instantaneously. Like I honestly have started to see that when your consciousness change, things change without anything happening. It's not like they change and then you do something and then you change it. That happens too. But it absolutely, as soon as your mind and your heart and your thing changes, things change. Like that has a ripple. So everybody, the consciousness that people are getting behind, the ripple of that in totality is the world we're in. That's the way it looks to me, right? So my strategy is go to that power as the first step, because that has an impact straight away, and then stay open to the issues, stay serious about the issues, but what do you do from there? What makes sense from there? And that's kind of been what I've been, the way I've been trying to look at it. And it's not always easy, and it might not actually be right. It's just, that's been my premise. But it's not always easy, like particularly on the things we've been talking about today. It's like some of those articles you sent me about climate change, I was like out of my mind. I'm like, because I know it's true. and actually it was really interesting, because one of the things that made it hard for me to actually think about, my mind did not want to let go of my made up assumptions about reality. And my made up assumptions of reality were, when I grew up, there was no, the basic assumption was, oh, things go on like this forever. You know, things go on like this forever. That's just it. And I had that idea in my mind, and I was living on that assumption, and the whole climate issue just rips that needle right off the record, if anybody knows what a record is. And I was resistant to that. I didn't want that taken away. I don't want that taken away. I want to think I go out, I can go to work, I can get a latte, I can do this, I can do that. No, it's a, you know, kind of like, and when people get manic, it's okay, it's going to be okay. And it was like, it was looking at the consciousness of that and saying, that can't happen. You can't have that, Aaron. That's not, you can't have that. That's part of the problem. You can't have that. That has the feeling, that's part of the problem. And it took me 2 weeks to be willing to let go of that. I was like clinging to the last piece of wood of a ship. I would not let go of that. And it was really disturbing to me. It's like, oh my God, Aaron, you're like the orchestra on the Titanic. You're clinging to this idea like you're gonna, this is madness. And it was shocking to me to see how I wanted to think fresh and connected to what's actually happening. But I had this piece of me that just didn't want to let go. And it was really interesting, really interesting. And I could see that, you know, I would die clinging to that thought, you know, and like you said about fascism, I'd end up in you know, with a star sewn to my jacket, having lived with the hope that it will be all right in 6 months. That was my mentality. And it was the feeling that clued me into it, the desperation, the fear, the absolute refusal to look outside of it. And I had to get, it was so funny because in the end I saw like I'm trapped in a thought I don't want to live in, that's going to kill me and everybody else. I don't want to do this. And in the end I'm like, look, you have to open up, like, to yourself. And it was just like, look, Aaron, you can go this way or you can go that way, and not force myself either way. And it was really profound. It felt like jumping off an airplane, to be like, okay, so I'm actually thinking it's likely not to be all right. I'm actually thinking it's likely not to be all right. Like, this is real. Yeah, if it's real, it's real. Can we get with what's real? Is that all right with you? And it's like, in my heart of hearts, I wanted to, but I needed, in a way, I had to kind of be loving and open, but uncompromising. And I just had this moment where I just, it just kind of shifted. And I was so relieved, because there are so many things we need to think and be open to in order to make progress. And I just wasn't able to. It's like, Aaron, what do you think we should do? Don't worry, it'll be all right. Let's just get a latte.
I would like to say something, if that's okay.
Yeah.
When a few months ago, when the death of Mr. Lloyd happened, For the ones who don't know, I'm actually based in UK, and the death of Mr. Lloyd happened in the US, and I'm originally from Portugal. And many things came through my system, and I was extremely upset about it. And I could not for the life of me understand why I was so upset about something that happened in a different country to a person I never met. However, that connected to a lot of experiences that I had in the past, right? And I found myself in a very vulnerable place trying to shut down that fearful thinking. I like to see myself as a brave, courageous person. Amy was talking about crisis in the beginning of the call. I had my crisis like everyone else. And I assume every single person in this call had their personal crisis, makes part of growing and being alive and having experiences. But I felt so afraid. And right now, I guess I'm kind of attempting to make it intellectual, but it was excruciating, like it was happening to me because it brought me memories from the past. And I found myself going the tailspin for several days. I just couldn't cope. And by coincidence, and I'm going to use inverted commas because based on my background, when I say coincidence, that is God moving through without wanting to sign it. Aaron and I started talking on LinkedIn, and it was something that I said he picked up, and we got on the phone. And at that time, I just needed really some grounding because all the grounding that the three principles was not helping me. I was in that tailspin and I wasn't seeing. I knew, when people tell you, I know it's really just thought, but at that time, I didn't know it was thought at all. And for that moment, it was really important to have a friend just to get on the other side of the phone and listen without judgment, where I didn't have to be careful with my words and just explain and express what was going on for me. Not worried if I was sounding three principally, not worried if I was being politically correct, just being raw and authentic. And that helped my mind to quiet down within the next 2 to 3 days. And then that created the space to become strategic. But in that moment, when I was feeling all that anger, fear, all that emotion coming through my system, I felt that if it wasn't for Aaron or the intelligence of life moving through Aaron to reach out to me, I don't know how I would cope. So, and I guess sometimes it's all it takes is being open, that if your intuition is saying, reach out to so-and-so, just reach out to so-and-so. You don't need to show up in a certain way. Yeah. If that feeling comes through you, is because you are the right person to reach out and do your best. Yeah, this is what I've got to share right now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I say something? Aaron, I loved everything that you said. It really resonated with me, and especially the stuff about the profound feelings. It's really interesting. So it was about 18 months ago, well, no less than that I really woke up to the climate and ecological crisis. And I was the same as you. I was kind of like, no, I'm in the consciousness business. That's somebody else will sort that out. And yeah, and the feelings hit me with the worst grief I've ever experienced in my life. But it felt, as well as being excruciating, it felt right and pure because, as many people have said, we grieve what we love. It's the flip side of the coin. And it's a sign of our humanity, and it's a sign of our caring. And the truth that I've discovered is you don't stay there. But I think and out the other end of that comes something really, it was very surprising for me, but also incredibly, wonderful. So more courage, more love, more compassion, more resilience. And but I think you do have to be prepared to look into that abyss properly, or go into that abyss properly. And I work with a lot of climate activists these days, and even people who are kind of fighting against it are often very, very reluctant to go there because of the, you know, what they think are going to be very painful feelings. So I just wanted to say that there is, I actually think the discomfort of not going there is worse ultimately than you know, what happens when you go through it and out the other side.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it's just a one-off thing. I mean, I still sometimes, you know, some of that grief comes back, but it's a kind of a, it feels like wisdom, not like being upset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does make sense. It does make sense. It kind of, what, listening to you, Kim, it links back to what Clacia was saying. It's like, there's a way in which you don't know, like I liked what you said, Clacia, like things stirred up, but you didn't really know what was happening in your mind. But there was something at play. There was something playing out in your mind that in a way, I don't know, took you through something, that looked after you. And same in what you're saying, Kim. And the only thing that occurs to me, I can relate to what you're saying, but there's something about, and I don't think we're very good at this. Like, I don't think human beings are very good at this, knowing that you don't know. So like something happens to us and we say, oh, that's the way it is. Okay, everybody, this is how it is. And that, to me, that's not the way it is. It's like, if you go deeper, you don't know the way it will be. It will just be better or more informed or richer or in the right direction. And it's like, and I think that's the challenge for people, is like going into something that might be more grief than you've ever had before, or might be something stirred up in you, or might be you know, an immediate epiphany. Well, who knows? We don't know. We just don't know. It'll just take us beyond where we're at. And like, that's links to what Amy was saying. I think because we know, oh, there's mind, consciousness and thought, we think we know what's going to happen. So we keep ourselves in our little, oh yeah, I know how it works. And it's like, well, no, actually, the whole point is it's not you at all. You have, I mean, it's you. It's not you, and you have no idea how it works. So it really resonates what you're saying about, like, you're going through things as you go. I mean, that makes a lot of sense as well. I think it's wonderful. I mean, it's really touching what you said as well about the depth of being able to go through something that's that deep, but yet is not disturbing or negative in any way, even though it's painful. I think we overlook that a lot.
I have a question I wanted to ask, kind of relating to what everyone's been talking about. And thank you for this. This has been such a gift. So
Good.
really appreciated this whole conversation.
And the song.
And the song, everything.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. Thank you. I've had an insight recently that the only way that people are going to be, because same as everyone, like I went in 2019, I went through all of the grief and all of the personal crises of waking up to the fact that we're killing the earth and there's going to be a future that is totally not like the past. And one of the things that I've seen recently, because I've been asking the question all summer, how do we change the population? Like, how do we get more minds than just these little kind of small silos of people to care and to do things differently? And I've seen recently that it is about awakening love instead of coming from fear. That the fear narrative is actually incredibly damaging and paralyzing if that's what we want to be up to, telling people that, hey, you're gonna lose everything and you're gonna experience a lot of grief, and like it that's not, to me, the most effective way. So orienting myself to the need to come from love and to be spreading love and to be looking in the direction of, you know, awakening love. I see how necessary that is, and yet I also have a lot of questions about how, especially in, like, I see it more clearly when it's looking at like, oh, me and the people in my immediate circle, but less so when it comes to actually rippling out to kind of affect change. So anything that you have to say about that? I know you've been working with people for like 20 years, so this
Yeah.
awakening love is clearly something that you have some experience with.
Yeah. I mean, the way, I mean, I don't know, I mean, you can see what you think, Shannon, but I think what makes sense, what has made sense to me is to hold myself to a very high standard of what counts as openness and what counts as openness and what counts as a clear mind.
Mm.
And I know that there are aspects of that that are undeniable, like, you know, you're open when you're able to listen and you have the feeling of interest and engagement and right. And when you don't, you're kind of letting things get in the way. And you know you're open and clear-minded when you have a natural ease and you have a natural goodwill, you know. So I'm very interested when I lose my goodwill for people. And generally, I'm not perfect by any means, but generally I'm very unwilling to ascribe it to anything but my own lack of clarity.
Mm.
So I catch myself all the time making up reasons why it doesn't make sense to listen, or they're blah blah blah, and then it's really, really subtle, but it's like, I feel like if I can free myself from that, then there's nothing to stop that human respect and more love. And what's really interesting is when you look at the depth of love, it's kind of embarrassing. Embarrassing, you know. Oh, that went really well, I kind of like that person. It's like, oh god, yeah, compared to what it could be. But that's the beauty of it. It's like, you know, you're tapping an infinite, so it's kind of going in, kind of really going in that right direction. And I feel like the more uncompromising I am about being accountable for myself and not listening to my made up exceptions and exclusions and reasons, and being less willing to have those other feelings, well, to operate by bank those other feelings. Having them is not no problem at all, but banking them has been the most helpful thing.
Thank you. That was helpful. Because yeah, it is true. It's already there. The love is there. It's just what's getting in the way of that, which
Totally
usually comes down to us.
Totally. And your mind will create a thought that's less loving and then tell you why it's the other person's fault.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't want to buy that. You just don't want to buy that. And for me, I found that, all right, if I just go back to nothing, or to being interested in nothing but like really listening, then there's nothing that then I'm putting aside my interest in anything other than what's just the neutral part of the mind, which is the impersonal part of the mind, which is the connected part of the mind, which has that feeling of love. And you really do feel it, and it's shocking and wonderful sometimes, you know. Like, I've had people that I've been utterly frustrated with or totally hateful about, and like, be like, Aaron, stop blaming that on them, get back in there and like navigate yourself properly. And then all of a sudden there's care and interest and goodwill, and it's like, wow, this is amazing, what an idiot I was.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Good.
Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Draw, how are you?
Very good, considering everything.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
it was a wonderful way to start a day here in California.
Yeah.
In the context of all of what's been said, I have this one thought that I think I shared with very few people, but I think you'd be the perfect person to kind of reflect this with. It's not really a question, it's more like a thought, and what would be your take on that? So as I think about, you know, the climate crisis, and you know, live in California, we do I guess more than the average person, and as much as we can. But the more I dig into the principle, and with my background of really being a big observer and admirer of nature, having a way to somehow resolve the
Yes.
biggest crises, you know, I look sometimes at what happened at Chernobyl 20 years later and how nature took over, and I'm like, you know, we're really thinking. So realizing that there's such an immense intelligence behind life, and especially behind nature that we talk.
Yes.
Maybe this whole climate crisis, you know, is nature way to, I don't know if to eradicate, but to reduce us, the most invasive and destructive species on the planet. And all of what we do is, no matter what we're gonna do, gonna be a drop in the sea. And I'm not saying to stop doing, but I'm like, it doesn't matter if you believe in God or the intelligence behind life or the intelligence behind nature. To me, it's like, well, this is nature way, whatever it is, the hurricanes, the fires, the water rising, to fix us.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, totally. I don't think nature's in trouble. I'm with you. I can't see how nature's in trouble, and nature's totally going to be fine, because you can't beat the system. You can't be massively off track, totally out of sync, out of alignment, out of synergy, out of and sustain that. You can't. So we're in trouble because we're totally off track. I was totally with you. Nature's not in trouble. Yeah.
So if you're with me, so when I have this thought, I'm just like, so I go to this thing. So why do we worry so much about it and try? And, you know, I mean, and really going off the thing to try. Why don't we just, I don't know, as hard as it, accept it? And I get that is, to me, it's really devastating to know that probably the future generation is going to pay the price for our things. To me, that's really devastating. But beyond that, like, I don't know. And as you said, we don't know. Maybe some kid that is just being born now gonna resolve all of that with some technology 20 years. I mean, I don't know. We don't know. So anyway, so my mind goes to that. I don't want to say to defeat, but like, you know, if I don't know, then maybe I shouldn't go that crazy about it.
Well, I agree with you that you don't want to go so crazy about it, but I do care about, and maybe this because I watch too many movies, but I do care about the human race. And I do think that if we can clean up our act primarily at the level of purity of mind and then outward from there, I think that would be wonderful. I think that's important. I think that's part of the game of life. Personally, I think that's the game of life. And I think we're really under pressure to do that. And you know, there's never been a better time, you know. And also, I'm kind of with Kim in I don't know if Kim went, but I'm kind of with Kim in the sense that on a human level, it's really galling and tragic and frightening and all of that. I mean, I think it would be incredibly interesting, that's for sure. But yeah, so I can see what you're saying, but I do see there's kind of a game or a battleground at play, and I do feel like I feel that's what we're here for. And I feel like with the principles, we have the tools to really get in there and be a part of it, and I'm kind of, personally, I'm into it.
No, I mean, I'm with you. I wasn't implying at all to resigning of that battle, but again, it's a very personal thing. I'm like, why, when I go to throw the trash, I worry so much about did I like, for every actions that we're doing, and the more mindful, quote unquote, we become, it's more in my mind. So I think the worrying part is is, and then I
Yeah.
speak with some people that I don't know if they do much. It's a California thing, but they talk so much and so
Yes.
suffer so much around it. I'm like, just talk less, be a bit more of
Yes.
go less to Starbucks, and
Yeah.
you'll be good.
But
So yeah, so the worrying part is kind of like what gets into me.
yeah. See, Draw, for me, when I'm that way, okay, because I get that way about lots of things. When I'm that way, I start to get more interested in what I would be seeing, feeling, and thinking on the other side of the worry. It's like, but for the
Mm.
worry, what would I be thinking? What would I be doing? What would I be feeling? And that's more interesting to me. Well, that's the part I'm interested in.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a good
Yeah.
one.
Thank you.
I just want to chime in. We have 8 minutes or so, and we can go a little over if we need to, but probably won't do too much. The Black Lives Matter and the issues of Indigenous and people of color, and the climate crisis, in my mind now, much more so than I saw a year and a half ago, are very connected.
Mm-hmm.
Because on a global level, the colonialism and the extraction and the production and the way that, mostly white people, not all white people, but
Mm-hmm.
mostly white people have thought about the world and what it's
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
people who are not technologically at the same level are for,
Yeah.
is a huge part of the problem. And we
Yeah.
have, in my mind, and this of course is just me also playing the game, we have a responsibility to correct our mistakes and
Mm.
to, these people are suffering now the most in Africa, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There already are droughts.
Yeah.
Central America, already there are droughts. So that's part of it. And it gets complicated sometimes. I think for me, it's about the form and the formless. Like sometimes I'm in the form and I'm doing my best and trying to stay and connected to mind with that. And sometimes I do have to let it all go, honestly, and just get very
Mm-hmm.
present and be in my garden. And I know that it's a
Mm-hmm.
great privilege where I am. But to me, it's a good use of that privilege
Yeah.
to get grounded, because if I get too involved, uh, it's just like work or anything. Like you need that space in your mind.
Yes.
The other thing I just wanted to mention is I shared a video with the people who did trainings for Extinction Rebellion, and that includes Julianne on this call, and Aaron and Chantal, of Kimberly Jones, I think her name is, who had a video of being very angry about the looting that had happened and the way people were responding. And I once had a call with Sydney Banks where he was so angry with me. And then the minute, like every time I tried to say something, he would get really angry, like just so like over the top anger like I've never experienced. And then the minute I shut up and was quiet, he would start teaching me the principles in a completely different tone. And so I personally am not opposed to the occasional use of anger. I don't know that I see it as separate from love sometimes. I mean, actually, sometimes Sid could be too much, just to be honest. But and I know that I make mistakes and I can be too much. And that's when I need to, well, wait a second, is this personal? Are you feeling personally angry? Or is this more like, hey, this is a situation where anger is like, I guess I just want to put that out because I feel like in some ways I'm sort of the one note samba and the Pied Piper of this right now. And I don't think I will be forever. It's just something that I keep wanting to share. If does that make sense? I don't even know if I made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. I think we're all, I mean, the way it resonates with me, Amy, is, and I'd love to hear from other people, is that we're all learning about consciousness and clarity and really having spirit, like a power of spirit in what we do without it getting contaminated by our human frailties. And that's the way I see it. And what you said earlier about the tone police is like, it's very easy to think that you have that nailed, and then you live in this very small controlling world, which is not good for you, and it's not good for your relationships, and it's not good for your learning, and it's not good, it doesn't help anybody, kind of like as Clasia said. But to see, like, we're all students of that, we're all learning about that. I don't know, I mean, I totally relate to what you're saying, and it's like, well, I don't know, I only learn and experiment as I learn and experiment. So I mean, yeah.
We might have time for one more comment or question, or we could be feeling done. Anybody?
Is it okay to jump in, Amy?
Yeah, who's
Can you
this?
hear?
Oh,
Julie.
Hi, Julie, go for it.
So I just wanted to say I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much to everyone, Amy and Aaron. Really very grateful. It's like I've been thirsty and it's quenching.
Uh-oh, we can't hear you right now. But drawer are you in the same drawer?
She's in the
she's
in the garden, so I think she's a little bit out of connection.
No, she's back. She's back.
Back.
Can you hear? Okay. So one of the things that I really am grateful for is at different levels of consciousness, I've seen, oh, that's the distortion of my mind, you know, and I've worked with it at a personal level or professional level. But when it comes to these world events, I'm finding it's having me dig deeper. And the digging deeper is what I felt like you spoke to today, Aaron. Like, you know, I'll have all these different distortions come through my mind, like yelling at the RNC this week, or getting really worked up and anxious. But also knowing that there's some depth of minds that I really want to bring forward, and that's where the greatest level of impact can come from. So I don't know how to speak to it too eloquently, but I'm just very grateful for that conversation, and am hopeful that there'll be more of this nature so that it can be in community.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like the challenge of our times is kind of challenging us. Like, we can't do what we need to do at our current level of consciousness. Our current level of consciousness is part of this stasis, this balance of power in the form and formless. And that's what we're pushed to do, and we're so lucky we know about that. And so we can kind of find that. And the beauty of it is what it really is rich for us, but it's also the basis of what we need, what everybody needs, and people waking up about it. And, you know, like I mean, just on the racism issue, it's just the more comfortable I've got looking at it, which is embarrassing to say I haven't before, the more I can see it looks to me now like the key issue is the how oblivious we are to our own prejudice. Not prejudice, but like, yeah, seeing people differently and acting differently in all the imperceptible ways. It's not deliberate, it's not discriminatory, it's not prejudice, but it's like but it's in play and it's everywhere, and it can't change until we wake up to it. And we can't wake up to it till we get comfortable seeing something that might not look good. But if you see it and it doesn't look good, you can, you know, that what Clasia talked about can kind of, you know, take you beyond it. But yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying.
Can I ask a quick question?
So it's okay. It's okay with me.
Okay, great. I was just wondering what you meant when you said that thought is the only reality, because I've heard that in relation to the three principles before, but I'm not really sure what it means. Like, I guess some part of me kind of bristles when I that, especially like, you know, a fire just burned down 550 houses here. Like, that's not thought, you know.
Well, yes. Well, I can tell you what I meant by it, Cynthia, and as best I can, and then you can tell me if it still bristles or it makes sense or it's I'm completely out of my mind. It's all possible. But what I meant by it is that it looks to me, and well, it looks to me like the reality that I'm aware of is constructed in my mind as a perception. The building blocks of it, the content of it, it's like a historical drama, you know. So my mind is kind of creating an experience of information, and that's happening completely from my mind, right? And that's why, so I was in I worked with a restaurant, and the general manager told me that they were trained on fires, and one of the wait staff came and said, there's a fire, dragged her in front of the fire, and she flipped out. The fire was so overwhelming, she couldn't think of anything. She was just standing in front of it as it burned away. And somebody else saw it differently and saw, oh, you have to come away, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do that. And it's really useful to see that no matter what you're dealing with. So one time somebody said to me, well, Aaron, are you saying that you're making up that there's a bridge there, and if you weren't thinking there, you'd fall in the water? And I'm like, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that someone can be driving their car, drive for 10 miles and not really register where they've been, because they're experiencing what their thought was creating, right? And it's important to realize that. So if you have a fire, or you lose your house, or you're in danger, or whatever it might be, your mind can create infinite kinds of perceptions on that. You can see it one way, then you can, and not say that you should do that, it just does. You know, like Muhammad Ali said, someone who looks back over 10 years and sees things the same hasn't learned anything. And it's because as you think differently, you see things differently. You can see it with more or less anxiety, you can see it with more or less fear, you can see different aspects of it. And that's something that the mind does all day, every day. A very simple example of it is, I have 2 children that are 17 and 15. That doesn't change. But yesterday afternoon, I could have waxed lyrical about how horrible they are and how much I hate them, and all the things about them that are just proof that I've been an absolutely awful parent and have failed and I should throw in the towel. This morning, they're still 17 and 15, and they really haven't changed a lot, but I can see how they've grown and blossomed, and not overnight, but just generally, and how, you know, I love them and I appreciate them and I'm grateful for them. And the reason it flips so schizophrenically is because my mind is constructing the perception. The outside world is not. It would be a lot more stable if it was the outside world constructing my perception. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. And I know Amy probably needs to go, so I appreciate the
That's a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
That's a pleasure, Cynthia.
I just want to make sure we're sort of respecting the time frame. Usually these are scheduled for an hour and a half. And
sorry.
But no, it's been, for me, you know, this has been really the nexus of, you know, the sort of the outside info, what's happening in the world, and the understanding of the principles coming together is probably what I most, is my heart's sort of delight, my dream. And
me too.
And I can't see anything but good happening from that.
Me too. Yeah.
So I really appreciate, and if you, Aaron, if you think of someone else who might be happy to come and speak.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm working with Julianne and Jor on some projects, and we're also doing, I'm also working on a dialogue with Trump supporters, getting videos up. I'm very busy. I'm like, when I'm on the Titanic, I'm busy. Okay. I do sleep well at night. I do go for walks, but like, okay, what next? All right.
Yeah, good. That's good. That's good.
That may change for me after the election. I don't know. I have a feeling it will change, but for now it's fine. And it's a busy time, and that's fine. And I'm so grateful for everyone.
Yes.
On this
Thank
call
you.
and for you, Erin. And I'm going to
Pleasure.
put it out. And if you guys thought it was helpful, I think we covered everything from the basics. We covered a lot, and it was really good. And so let's share this video with others if we can, I think. And just lots of love to you all.
Yeah, lots of love to you all. It was nice to see you, Chantel, and nice to meet people that I haven't met before.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
Pleasure.
Lovely.
Bye. Bye, Deborah.
That was my daughter.
Bye.
She's having her delayed birthday because we had to evacuate on her birthday. So we're setting up the place.
Oh.
Her birthday party. Ciao, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Have fun.
Bye.
Love you.
Love you too. Talk soon.
Yeah, talk soon.